The 9,911th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. I should like to take this opportunity to pay tribute on behalf of the Council to His Excellency Mr. Jérôme Bonnafont, Permanent Representative of France, for his service as President of the Council for the month of April. I am sure I can speak for all members of the Council in expressing deep appreciation to Ambassador Bonnafont and his team for the great diplomatic skill with which they conducted the Council's business last month. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, and Serbia to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. I kindly request the Protocol Officer to escort Her Excellency Mrs. Željke Cvijanović, Chairperson of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, to her seat at the Council table. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Mr. CRISTIAN Schmitd, High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, to participate in this meeting. The representative of the Russian Federation has asked for the floor. I give him the floor.
President, we'd like to state our principal disagreement with the presence at this meeting of Mr. CRISTIAN Schmitd in his capacity as the so-called High Representative. The Security Council did not endorse him in this position. We'd like to remind you that the BAH issue has been on the Security Council's agenda under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. There is almost 25 years of practice of us endorsing the High Representative. Thus, without the requisite Security Council mandate, the position of the High Representative remains vacant. In light of the above, I'd like to underscore that Mr. Schmitd has no right to speak on behalf of the international community, nor to submit any documents to the Security Council. However, the Security Council does have a practice according to which we can listen to briefers in a personal capacity. This is how we're going to construe Mr. Schmidt's presence in the room today. However, given that he has definitively discredited himself through his attempts to usurp power in the BAH and the fact that he's doing everything to destabilize the situation in the country, which is already very tense, and I'm going to speak to that later in my intervention, I do not intend to spend any time listening to his biased thoughts. Thank you.
I take note of the remarks of the Permanent Representative of the Russian Federation. It is decided to invite High Representative Schmitd to participate in this meeting. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I also invite His Excellency Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis, Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2025/24272, letter dated 1st of May 2025, from the Secretary General addressed to the President of the Security Council. I now give the floor to Mr. CRISTIAN Schmitd.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, esteemed Chairwoman of the Presidency of Bosnia-Herzegovina. In 2 days' time, on May 8th, we will commemorate 80 years since the end of World War II in Europe. This is the day when Hitler's aggression was finally brought to an end, albeit after sustaining incredible losses of life and unbearable scars of humanity. 80 years on, we still mourn the victims of Hitler's aggression. At the same time, these events lead to the conclusion that preventing war and reaching peaceful settlements of conflicts is possible within a rules-based order. This very body, the Security Council of the United Nations, we have the honor to report, by adopting its resolution 1031 on December 1995, is the answer given by those who believed and continue to believe that living in peace and freedom is the first and foremost fundamental right of every human being. Soon after, at the end of May this year, the representatives of NATO countries and the wider international community, as well as the representatives of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, and Serbia, will get together in Dayton, Ohio, to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Dayton Peace Agreement, which ended the bloodshed and genocide of 1992 to 1995. The war in Bosnia and Herzegovina brought back old horrors, atrocities, and human agony not seen in Europe since the end of the Second World War. The 1995 Dayton Accords, as a successful reaction to this war, could only be possible on the basis of rules, the Charter of the United Nations, including Chapter 7, and a negotiated settlement paving the way in the region for a common future after the dissolution of Yugoslavia. This peace agreement of Dayton included ad hoc mechanisms and instruments of international control to safeguard a sustainable peace, including human rights and a functioning democracy. Looking onto these two monumental dates here today, before I start my address to the United Nations Security Council as High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the value of life over death and the cause of peace over hostility and the preference of humanity over savagery. In this context, there is a personal impression which I feel obliged to share with you today. These days, I'm increasingly approached by citizens of all ethnic backgrounds in Bosnia-Herzegovina, asking me, Mr. Schmidt, can you please make sure that we do not stumble into a war again? To this, I always respond that I do not see a danger of war, as nobody wants to go through such an experience again. Unfortunately, inflammatory political rhetoric, insults, and the disregarding of the terror and the atrocities that culminated in the genocide of Srebrenica are put into question the political will by some actors to ensuring the continued existence of Bosnia and Herzegovina as a state, as stated in Article 1 of the Constitution, which is Annex 4 of the Dayton General Framework of Peace. I have to add that the international community and the neighboring countries did in reality not follow any such attempts. Since my appointment by the PIC Steering Board as the international competent body on May 27, 2021, I have the honor of submitting to the United Nations Secretary General and the Security Council 8 reports on the implementation of the General Framework Agreement for Peace in Bosnia-Herzegovina, better known as the Dayton Peace Agreement. My competence given to the HR, the High Representative by the PIC Steering Board, have been reaffirmed, endorsed, and welcomed in United Nations Security Council Resolutions 1031, 1174, 1247, and others repeatedly. The Dayton Agreement was no ordinary legal document. This 30 years after its signing, it remains the basis for the democratic and multi-ethnic structure of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Annex 4, the constitution of the state, is a very complex document which would benefit from further democratic development. The implemented rules and checks and balances to safeguard the representation and participation in decision-making by the three constituent peoples and the others includes non-discriminatory rights for all voters of Bosnia and Herzegovina. All constituent people are not politically unitaristic, but contribute to the richness of the respective different political positions beyond the ethnic or religious background. This was highlighted in the so-called Sejdic-Finci judgments 2009 by the European Court of Human Rights, as well as other decisions such as the Komšić and Ljubić case of the Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina. These judgments addressing election requirements are to be implemented. The Croat political parties in the country, not only HDZ as a leading party, also supported by the Prime Minister of Croatia, have clearly expressed their position in this regard. The Prime Minister of Croatia also indicated that the issue that has a particular importance for Bosnia and Herzegovina's European integration. At this moment, in which BiH is invited to join negotiations over future European Union membership, the need to amend the constitution, not only in this context, is both evident and important. This has to be ensured by the pouvoir constituant of the people and citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina and their legitimately elected representatives. The international community, based on its competences agreed on and founded in the Dayton Agreement, can play a supporting role in this process. And now allow me another clarification. Colonialism has beaten out the hands of those suppressed their individual and collective rights of decision. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, the right of decision is the hands of all, not unilaterally against the international agreed constitution and agreed laws, but by developing and amending them together. The European Union's requirements regarding the necessary adoption of internationally accepted state of law, with the stability of institutions guaranteeing democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and respect for and protection of minorities, as stated in the Copenhagen criteria, describe the path that needs to be followed. The current status of Bosnia and Herzegovina, based on a Chapter 7 authorization of the UN Security Council, could then be finalized. Furthermore, this could create the conditions to deem the mandate of the ad hoc institutions of the Dayton General Framework of Peace going for outfacing. Today, I have to inform you that the conditions for a full implementation of the civilian aspects of the peace agreement in Bosnia and Herzegovina have vastly deteriorated with respect to previous reporting periods. Especially, the first quarter of this year was marked by a significant rise of tensions, which without question amounts to an extraordinary crisis in the country since the signing of the Dayton Agreement. I may underline that I see a political crisis. I do not yet have indications for a security crisis. As indicated in my report, this sudden deterioration of the conditions is stemming from the reactions to the first instance verdict of the Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina that convicted President of Republika Srpska entity Milorad Dodik for neglecting acts of institutions ultra vires. In hindsight, the recent actions appear to be a deliberate culmination of policies that had been planned and prepared for a long time and which I regularly pointed out in my previous reports. Thus, the recent development was initiated by merely taking advantage of the opportunity that the verdict offered. After the verdict, Mr. Dodik intensified his attacks on the constitutional order of the country by directing the authorities of the Republika Srpska to adopt legislation that effectively bans state-level judiciary and state-level law enforcement in the Republika Srpska, and by even putting on the table a draft entity constitution hinting at de facto secession. This draft constitution, a document of considerable complexity, was revealed shortly after the verdict was announced. The speed which with this document, but also the draft laws were made public, suggests strongly that they have been prepared well in advance. For one, these acts and this legislation fundamentally contradict the implementation of the Dayton Peace Agreement and its annexes. In consequence, the Constitutional Court of this country has at once annulled all these laws passed by RSNA. For two, they endanger the territorial and social integrity of the country and of its people by performing secessionist acts. And three, they also create legal and executive insecurity by establishing entity laws and institutions that contradict and compete with state law and competence. It will require institutions created in Dayton, such as the Constitutional Court, to prevent this country from falling apart, and when it comes to safeguarding the functionality of the state, my legal competences as High Representative as well. Consequently, the state-level coalition has been seriously affected. The European Union access and momentum has stalled. The functionality of the state is being undermined, and reforms have been sidelined. This development is not irreversible, but it's severe. It needs to be addressed without delay. It requires active engagement by the international community. Respected member of the Security Council, as I have reported in my current report, the general economic situation appears to be stable for the time being, despite the current crisis. However, the demographic situation in the country is not improving. The heavy loss of young and skilled members of the population constitutes an impediment to the economic and social sustainability of the country. A better understanding of the danger requires better data, ideally in the form of a new census. Alas, the discussion surrounding a new census is highly politicized. We're just waiting these days for the new UNFPA report about the demographic development in the country. Coupled with unmistakable environmental degradation and recurrent disasters, it is safe to conclude that daily life in Bosnia-Herzegovina is not getting easier. In these troubling times, Bosnia-Herzegovina has felt the unwavering support of the international community on its side against this existential threat. All members of the PIC steering board and a great number of UN members have reacted to these policies by expressing their concerns, urging to stop such disruptive actions, and stressing inter alia their unwavering support to the full implementation of the Dayton Peace Agreement and for the unity and territorial integrity of Bosnia-Herzegovina. It is imperative to continue these efforts. I would also like to express hereby my gratitude to the United Nations Security Council for reaffirming this unequivocally committed to the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Bosnia-Herzegovina in full accordance with the Dayton Peace Agreement. I regard this statement as a compassionate support for Bosnia-Herzegovina. I note that the Serb community did not pay heed to Mr. Dodik's unlawful directives. For example, ethnic Serbs employed in state-level institutions have been pressured into abandoning their posts, but these calls and threats have been left overwhelmingly unanswered. Despite the difficult political situation, I also have no doubt about the Serb community's commitment to pursue the European path. It is clearly expressed by the opposition parties, PDP, SDS, and more. The Bosniak community has been able to remain calm despite the tensions and to continue on the path of patient dialogue, also in order to keep the country's European integration on the table. And as for the Croat community, I also notice a continuing pro-European commitment, as well as an increased willingness to engage in inter-ethnic dialogue, including in local disputes. The case of the Central District of Mostar, some details of which are present in my current report, without taking sides constitutes a good example. In this specific case, I would prefer local actors to work out a solution among themselves rather than a solution brought about by the international community. Goodwill exists and needs to be encouraged so that I can overcome the disruptive noise that is spread by some actors. We put our trust in those who remain committed to ensuring a peaceful coexistence in one city, including different boroughs. As I hear Mayor Kordich and the head of municipal council have taken concrete steps for solving the situation in a good manner. Let's wait and see. Let us be clear that people of Bosnia and Herzegovina can and do live together. For the most part, the communities in the country do not support extremism or secessionism. There's an ample evidence for that in daily life, but ethnocentric politics spends too much time on dividing the communities rather than uniting them. We witnessed the good and the bad developments all at once. Having said that, what is the way forward? I reported previously discrimination remains to be a complex problem encompassing many issues and groups. I therefore renew my call upon political leaders in Bosnia and Herzegovina to launch comprehensive constitutional and legal reforms to tackle this problem. Whilst the constitutional framework has to be improved, past attempts have shown the sensitivity of the matter. It is important to keep in mind that Bosnia and Herzegovina is a state of 3 constituent peoples, representatives of others and all citizens, and the protection given to all has to be safeguarded while remaining discrimination from the current constitutional framework. Such a constitutional reform process should also be aimed to address the European Commission's 14 key priorities. Needless to say, there is considerable amount of overlap between the 14 key priorities and the 5+2 agenda objectives, which are the basis of my engagement by decision of the Peace Implementation Council. Rule of law and retrenchment of rule of law is one of the most important issues. Therefore, I take this opportunity to reiterate that the way forward also requires acknowledging that Dayton and the European Union reform agenda are mutually reinforcing. The task of amending the Constitution in a way that is fully compatible with EU norms is by no means easy. I suggest that all those interested in ensuring a bright and prosperous future for Bosnia and Herzegovina organize a conference on these issues. The issue of state property in Bosnia and Herzegovina remains unsolved. This issue continues to represent a significant barrier to the country's economic development. Considering the challenges caused by the current lack of a state-level legislation on the matter, there's a need for the international community to remain engaged. As part of 5+2 agenda, I also follow my obligation to initiate a facilitation process. Thus, the challenges faced by Bosnia and Herzegovina are complex and varied, but let us be clear, the extraordinary crisis Bosnia and Herzegovina is currently facing is the result of severe attacks by some in political responsible against the Dayton Peace Agreement, encompassing the constitutional legal order of BOH, and has nothing to do with the Dayton Peace Agreement itself. It puts on it the misinterpretation of Dayton. Dayton is to be developed democratically and discussed, but not put into question. Everybody in Bosnia and Herzegovina must understand that no individual stands above the law. On the contrary, everybody has to respect the rule of law. Distinct members of the Executive Council, to conclude, Bosnia and Herzegovina is facing difficult times. Nobody would have expected 30 years ago that the international community is needed as much today as it is. But the peace agreement that this UN Security Council endorsed 30 years ago remains the very foundation of which the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina, with its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence, can be built. Reopening or redefining the peace agreement challenges the basis for peace and prosperity in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This does not mean mean that we should not talk about necessary amendments and adoptions of this constitution. The way forward includes counter threats and attacks to its very foundation, but also implementing meaningful reforms, including in the context of the country's European integration. It is about strengthening institutional stability and functionality of the state and continuing to reinforce election integrity in view of the country's general elections in 2026. There should be a focus on. The High Rep, as an international ad hoc institution, has never intended to be permanent. But Bosnia and Herzegovina's aspirations for European integration will, for the foreseeable future, be built on the Dayton system as the fully reorganized subject of international law in legal continuation of the Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina. There are no other international subjects of international law in Bosnia-Herzegovina as the state. However, it must be made clear that eventually the international community cannot determine the future of the country. The impulses and the directions must come from the domestic level. I, therefore, call on the public leaders through the country to continue their pursuit to full European integration, implement reforms, and build a well-governed democratic society that provides prosperity for the current and future generations. The international community should continue giving its support and assistance to help the country and the people of Bosnia-Herzegovina to shape their future and to give reassurance that people in this country are not forgotten. In closing, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you and your governments for the support you have provided for Bosnia-Herzegovina and the Office of the High Representative. This support is also particularly relevant in relation to the necessary executive decisions which have to be taken in the authority vested in me as High Representative, as there is no other option. It should be somehow the last resort. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Schmidt for his briefing. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make a statement. I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank High Representative CRISTIAN Schmitd for his briefing. I also welcome the presence of Mrs. Željke Cvijanović, the chairwoman of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, in today's meeting, as well as the representatives of the EU, Croatia, and Serbia. Mr. President, as we have heard from Mr. Schmidt, Bosnia and Herzegovina is in the midst of a political and constitutional crisis marked by rising political tensions, institutional paralysis, and radical rhetoric and threats of secessionism. Persistent and pernicious nationalist rhetoric with underlying ethnically divisive messaging and blockade in governance seeks to undermine the general framework for peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina and state institutions and institutions of governance envisaged under this agreement. The situation remains unstable, and any further deterioration could potentially jeopardize regional peace and security. Mr. President, as indicated by the High Representative in his report, the events that have unfolded in the country in the past few months have put its two entities, the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska, on a perilous path of confrontation. This is deplorable. In this context, Mr. President, I would like to make the following points. First, Pakistan enjoys historical, long-standing, and fraternal ties with Bosnia and Herzegovina and its people. Pakistan firmly reiterates its support for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina and categorically rejects the secessionist rhetoric seeking to undermine BIH's territorial integrity. Second, we take note of RSS pronouncement about respecting sovereignty and territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina as provided in the Dayton Agreement. We hope that these declarations would also be backed by matching actions. Third, We are alarmed by the charged rhetoric and unilateral actions targeting the constitutional and governance structures and bodies in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We note with concern the passage of various laws by the RS entity that seek to limit the jurisdiction of state institutions and authorities, undermine their working, and moves to adopt a new constitution in the Republika Srpska. Such moves, which go against the Dayton Accord, only serve to escalate tensions and must cease. Fourth, the use of inflammatory religious and ethnic rhetoric to stoke tensions in the country must end. The region's tragic history serves as a stark reminder that national, racial, and religious hatred, discord, and intolerance can trigger horrific violence. We therefore urge all political actors to exercise prudence, act responsibly, and eschew the use of narrative that seeks to sow inter-ethnic and inter-religious discord and raise tensions. Fifth, Bosnia as a sovereign state has the right to choose its own alliances and partnerships. We support its EU aspirations and urge a constructive, forward-looking, and inclusive dialogue to advance reforms. Mr. President, in March, this Council unanimously called for adherence to the Dayton Accord, encouraging both sides to engage in a constructive dialogue. Today, we reiterate that call. In conclusion, Pakistan's commitment to Bosnia and Herzegovina's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity is unshakable. The path forward is clear. Dialogue must replace division. Cooperation must override confrontation, and unity must prevail over discord. We urge all parties to act with restraint, renounce divisive rhetoric, and work collectively towards lasting peace. All peoples of Bosnia and Herzegovina deserve nothing less than a future built on mutual respect, shared prosperity, and enduring peace. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statements, and now give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I wish to start by congratulating Greece on assuming the presidency of the Council for the month of May. The Chinese delegation will render you and your colleagues our full support. I also would like to take this opportunity to commend France for its work as the president of the Council last month. I welcome to today's meeting Her Excellency Cvijanović, Chair of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as the representatives from Serbia, Croatia, and the EU. President, recently, as the BIH court issued a verdict against the leader of the Republika Srpska, after which the RS National Assembly adopted a series of laws. Ethnic tension in BIH has further intensified and political differences further increased. This development is concerning. The current tension does not serve the interests of any party in BIH, nor is it conducive to peace and stability in the country and the region as a whole. I would like to point out that one major cause of the current tense situation is Mr. Schmidt's frequent invocation of the so-called bomb powers. This has exacerbated tension and disagreement among the communities in BIH rather than diffusing them, which has led to an increasingly difficult political situation in the country. I wish to reiterate that the role of the Security Council in appointing a High Representative constitutes established practice. The appointment of Mr. Schmidt has not been endorsed by the Council. At the same time, the High Representative system and its own powers are special arrangements for special times. They should not be considered lasting arrangements, let alone permanent ones. China calls on all communities in the country to exercise restraint, respond actively to the calls made in the press statement by the Council in March, and resolve differences through a sincere, open, and constructive dialogue. If the confrontation is allowed to intensify, leading to the deterioration and escalation of the regional situation, it will ultimately harm the interests of all communities in the country and its entire population. The international community should adopt a fair, balanced, and prudent approach, create favorable conditions for all the communities in the country to resolve disputes, and refrain from interfering in its internal affairs and taking sides, or even imposing unilateral sanctions. President, China's position on the question of BIH is consistent and clear. We respect its state sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, and the independent choice of its people for the future of the country. As a sovereign state, BIH's internal affairs should be ultimately managed by its people independently. The three ethnic groups in the country should aim to promote its national development and the well-being of its people, stay committed to constructive dialogue, and work together to maintain political and social stability of the country. China supports all efforts conducive to maintaining the peace and stability of BIH and commends the constructive roles played by Serbia, Croatia, and other regional countries in this regard. We hope that when implementing its mandate, the EU force in BIH fully heeds the views of all communities in the country and respect their views. China will remain committed to developing foreign relations with all communities in the country and playing a constructive role in safeguarding the peace and stability of BIH and the tranquility of the region. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statements. And now I give the floor to the permanent representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, congratulations on taking up your position as part of the presidency of the Security Council in May, and we'd like to thank France for its presidency in the previous month. We welcome the participation of Ms. Željke Cvijanović, chairperson of the presidency, who's participating in this meeting. In less than 6 months, the Security Council is discussing the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina for the third time. That alone attests to the fact that what's happening there is particularly serious as regards the maintenance and threats to peace and security. I don't think it's a stretch to say that the country is undergoing the most serious internal political crisis it has seen in the post-conflict period, one prompted by the desire of a host of external players and their backers inside BIH to revise the Dayton architecture and the system of the distribution of powers. What we're seeing are dogged attempts to recast BIH from a decentralized into a unitary state by reducing the broad powers and rights of the three constituent peoples and the two entities. We've warned on numerous occasions about the serious danger inherent in a revision to the General Framework Agreement for Peace. In its press statement issued on the 29th of March, the Security Council sent a clear signal to all parties about the fact that the Dayton Agreement is the cornerstone of the peaceful settlement process, and that all differences must be resolved via dialogue between Bosnians themselves, between the entities, and the constituent peoples. Regrettably, this unambiguous message was ignored by those who you'd think are the very people who should be establishing conditions for the implementation thereof. Again, we are witnessing the self-styled so-called High Representative, with the outright connivance, if not the support, of his Western backers. The High Representative is continuing to unapologetically interfere in the strictly internal affairs of the independent state of BIH. This time, he's doing so using trumped-up reasons which bear no relation to Dayton issues. In so doing, he's trying to cut off the oxygen to political parties in the Republika Srpska, RS, including those represented in the BIH parliament. This is clearly an attempt to eject from the political scene in the BIH of the most popular figures and structures in Serbian society, which began with the persecution of the president of the RS and the head of its government, Milorad Dodik, as well as the Speaker of the Parliament. All of the people I mentioned are democratically elected representatives. Their legitimacy and high popularity has once again been reasserted during the municipal elections held in October of last year. The convictions of the highest ruling leaders of the Serbian entity, and especially the fact that Milorad Dodik was issued with an arrest warrant for supposedly being suspected of undermining the constitutional order, only served to increase the level of tensions in the region as a whole many times over, instead of somehow trying to dial down the tensions which are already at fever pitch. What I'm referring to is the 23rd of April incident that occurred in eastern Sarajevo, where an operative group of SIPA, the State Investigation and Prosecution protection agency tried to issue court summons to the president of RS, Milorad Dodik. There's only one name for that: provocation. All the more that, given that one of the SIPA inspectors is suspected of war crimes against Serbs, and the other has ties to the Bosnian Muslim Secret Service. He had these ties during the 1992-1995 conflict. President, we cannot but conclude that Mr. Schmidt has set himself the objective of strangling all that's Serbian in the BIH. We stand convinced that the Council should state that this is categorically unacceptable, especially given that this amounts to deeds being done by the Western community. Thus, the West is becoming an accomplice to the lawlessness underway, which exhibits clear signs of colonialism as well as the hallmarks of xenophobia. Clearly, this destructive behavior is at the core of the current crisis, provoking an escalation of contradictions between the peoples of the BIH, preventing them from achieving a mutually agreeable solution to topical issues, inflating the conflict potential to dangerous proportions. At the end of the day, this is prompting the Security Council to meet time and again to discuss these issues. Attempts to pin all responsibility for what's underway in the BIH on Banja Luka, which we've heard which we'll be hearing in this chamber today, are, to put it lightly, incongruous. This is completely unhelpful. The focus should be on the root causes of crisis phenomena, not on their logical consequences. We're convinced that subjecting the Serbian people to ostracism yet again is not only unfair and contradictory given the reality of the situation, but can only exacerbate the entire situation, complicating attempts to find a way out of this dead end. And there is a way end. It lies through freeing the peoples of the BIH from external custodianship, which is poisoning their very existence. The Council needs to face the facts and to take a responsible decision on, at last, shutting down the Office of the High Representative in the BIH, which lost any added value long ago and has become a driver of conflict. We propose for the Council to issue a sober assessment of the situation in the BIH, based not on biased assessments divorced from reality, but on its own conclusions based on the reality of the situation. What can be useful in this are the reports regularly submitted to the Council by the RS government, including a new document which was circulated by us as an official Security Council document, and this yesterday on the 5th of May. Mr. President, a number of hotheads are proposing using the EU force in the BIH, Operation Althea, in interventions and using force on the part of BIH law enforcement authorities. This is totally senseless and unacceptable. Such ventures could result in a loss of control over the situation and could have unpredictable outcomes. We believe that the Althea leadership understands the weight of responsibility entrusted to it by the Security Council and will therefore only work within the confines of its mandate, which excludes any interference in the political affairs of a sovereign state. We saw no need to quantitatively increase the operational capabilities of Althea. We stand convinced that the priorities of the international community in the BIH remain the same: strengthening the country's data architecture in every way, assisting the implementation of the principle of equality of the three constituent peoples and two entities, delivering this European state from the Office of the High Representative, who has in fact become an instrument of oppression, and guaranteeing of the right to independent development to the peoples of Bosnia and Herzegovina. For its part, the Russian Federation, as one of the guarantors of the Dayton Agreement, stands ready to engage constructively to ensure genuine post-conflict settlement in the BIH. I thank you.
I thank the permanent representative of the Russian Federation for his statements, and now I give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Mr. President, I thank you for convening this debate. Allow me at the outset to extend Sierra Leone's warm congratulations to Greece on assuming the presidency of the Security Council for the month of May 2025. I assure you of my delegation's full support. I also congratulate the delegation of France for its effective stewardship during its presidency in April. I welcome the participation of Her Excellency Ms. Željke Cvijanović, Chairperson of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the representatives of Croatia and Serbia, as well as the head of the European Union delegation to the UN in this meeting. I thank Mr. CRISTIAN Schmitd, High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, for his briefing and take note of his report covering the period from 16th October 2024 to 15th April 2025 as submitted through the Secretary General. Sierra Leone acknowledges the vital role of the Office of the High Representative in overseeing the implementation of the Dayton Peace Agreement nearly 30 years since its signing. We acknowledge the High Representative's dedication during this reporting period, particularly in navigating an increasingly challenging political environment. We reaffirm our steadfast support for the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina within its internationally recognized borders. We therefore reject any actions that seek to undermine the gains achieved under the Dayton Agreement or impede the reform process essential for Bosnia and Herzegovina's path towards European Union accession, a pathway we consider integral to lasting peace, stability, and prosperity for all its people. We remain deeply concerned by the rising trend of ethical motivated political dissent and the escalation of divisive rhetoric into actions that threaten to unravel the Dayton framework. Such developments risk undermining the political, economic, and social fabric of BIH, placing its institutions and citizens at risk of renewed instability. The people of BIH have borne the consequences of ethnic nationalism in the past. It is therefore especially troubling when political leaders and institutions entrusted with safeguarding peace and stability are implicated in fueling divisiveness rather than fostering inclusivity. Mr. President, in this context, Sierra Leone wishes to underscore the following 3 points. First, we emphasize the critical importance of consensus building within BIH political processes, including ensuring the inclusive and constructive participation of all political actors. We commend the efforts of the Troika Coalition, which have demonstrated that cross-entity collaboration is not only feasible but beneficial. This spirit of cooperation should be nurtured and expanded, particularly in advancing necessary reforms under the 5+2 agenda and in support of EU accession negotiations. We recognize the complexity and diversity of BIH's political landscape. We urge political leaders to prioritize national unity, dialogue, and cooperation, keeping the welfare of the people at the center of their actions. In this regard, we encourage greater engagement with multi-ethnic and institutional platforms such as the Interreligious Council of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Parliamentary Assembly to foster trust, dialogue, and social cohesion. Second, we caution against conflating individual political agendas and separatist pressures with legitimate national aspirations. We're particularly concerned about recent legislative initiatives in the Republic of Srpska that risk exacerbating tensions and creating institutional uncertainty. We note the ongoing appeals process and call on all parties to respect judicial outcomes and refrain from actions that could undermine public confidence in the rule of law. We urge national stakeholders to prioritize measures that align with the vision of a united, stable, and forward-looking BIH. Sierra Leone recognizes the Constitution of BIH as the supreme legal framework of the state. We believe that continued adherence to the constitutional order is fundamental to lasting peace, while respecting the integrity and identity of each of its constituent entities. We encourage political actors to work within BIH inclusive governance structures at all levels. Third and finally, we underscore the continued relevance of international engagement in BIH. We appreciate the Security Council's close attention to developments as evidenced by its convening of 2 meetings this year, an affirmation of its commitment to multilateralism at a time of growing global challenges. We also reaffirm the indispensable role of the international community, particularly the Peace Implementation Council and the European Union, in supporting BIH stability. We encourage its efforts to remain focused on the country's peace and development beyond immediate geopolitical considerations. In closing, Sierra Leone commends the progress achieved in the administration of the Boko district and conveys its best wishes to the new administration in addressing ongoing challenges. We further recognize the valuable contributions of the Peace Building Fund in advancing the women, youth, peace and security agenda, and commend the work of the International Commission on Missing Persons in bringing closure to affected communities. We also acknowledge the European Union's steadfast commitment and investments towards Bosnia and Herzegovina's stabilization, and we call for continued constructive cooperation among all stakeholders in the best interest of its people. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for her statements, and now give the floor to the permanent representative of Slovenia.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. At the outset, let me first thank France for successfully steering the Council through April. And of course, I want to congratulate you, Mr. President, and Greece for taking up the presidency of the Council. You will have all our support and cooperation. Mr. President, we welcome Mrs. Željka Cvijanović, the chairperson of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we want to thank High Representative Schmidt for his report and for his briefing today. Mr. President, beginning of this year was marked by increased tensions in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This body reacted. We held 2 closed sessions on Bosnia and Herzegovina, culminating in the unanimous approval of the press statements. Let me re-emphasize the united message of this Council to the leaders in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Reduce political tensions, engage in dialogue, uphold the Dayton Peace Accords and the Constitution. Slovenia firmly supports these calls. We are committed to the peaceful development of Bosnia and Herzegovina and its future within the European Union. With this introduction, I want to make 3 points. First, Slovenia reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the primacy of the Dayton Peace Accords, our strong support for EU4 mandate in maintaining peace and security, and for the office of the High Representative. For nearly 3 decades, the Dayton Accords have upheld Bosnia and Herzegovina as a sovereign, independent, and multi-ethnic state. All political actors must exercise restraint and refrain from divisive actions. They must fully respect the Dayton Accords, the Constitution, and laws of Bosnia and Herzegovina. To fully uphold the rule of law, decisions of all institutions, including the courts, prosecutors, and police, need to be respected and due process followed. Slovenia firmly believes that the protection of Bosnia and Herzegovina's territorial integrity and sovereignty and the preservation of its democratic character are fundamental pillars of its future. Second, the ongoing political crisis that continues to impede the effective functioning of the state is deeply concerning and unacceptable. Slovenia strongly condemns the actions taken by the leadership of entity Republika Srpska, particularly their efforts to establish parallel legal and institutional frameworks. Such measures represent a serious threat to the constitutional order and the territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Third, Bosnia and Herzegovina's political leaders must honor the clear aspirations of their citizens, a future within the European Union. Citizens expect reforms, tangible progress, and stability, not political experiments. They seek a society rooted firmly in the rule of law, respect of human rights, and core European values. There is no place for divisive and secessionist rhetoric in Bosnia and Herzegovina's European journey, nor is there room for hate speech, historical revisionism, or glorification of war criminals. We must maintain a zero tolerance for such behavior, which fundamentally contradicts the principles of reconciliation and coexistence. This year's 30th anniversary of the Srebrenica genocide is a stark reminder of the devastating consequences that can arise from hatred. Rather than allowing the past to fuel divisions, we urge all political leaders to prioritize constructive dialogue, advance the necessary reforms, and to place the interests of their citizens first and above their own particular interests. So, Mr. President, Slovenia will continue to support and assist Bosnia and Herzegovina on its path toward European Union membership. By doing so, we are investing not only in Bosnia and Herzegovina's success, but also in the security, prosperity, and unity of the entire European continent. And to Bosnia and Herzegovina, your commitment to the European Union is seen as a strategic investment in the peaceful and prosperous future of Europe. Thank you.
I thank the permanent representative of Slovenia for his statements, and now I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I welcome the High Representative and thank him for his briefing. I'd also like to welcome the Bosnia and Herzegovina representatives in the chamber today. It's an honor to be back, Mr. President, in the Security Council and to see some familiar colleagues. I'm here today in my new capacity as the United Kingdom Special Envoy for the Western Balkans. I'm also here to show our support for the state of Bosnia and Herzegovina, for her institutions, and for the High Representative. And my Foreign Secretary is today visiting Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mr. President, as other people have said, it is an important year for anniversaries. The 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War and the founding of the United Nations, the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, which enjoins us to take heed about non-interference across borders, and above all, for these purposes, the 30th anniversary not only of Srebrenica, but also of the Dayton Peace Agreement itself. But in fact, Mr. President, Bosnia has been on the agenda of this Council since the early 1990s, and at times it has been the most serious issue that the Council has had to deal with. Dayton, Mr. President, is one of the successes of this Council, and because of that, the Council enshrined the Dayton Peace Agreement in a Chapter 7 Security Council Resolution 1031. This represented hard work by UNSC members over many, many years. It is unusual, as the High Rep and other speakers have said. It enshrined some very unusual civilian interventionist elements, but it stopped a war. And it's worth recalling, Mr. President, that at the time, that war was the worst Europe had seen since the end of the Second World War. It isn't colonialism for the Council to take an interest. It isn't colonialism for us to help Bosnia and Herzegovina along her path. As the High Representative said, the state of Bosnia and Herzegovina can evolve democratically. This itself is written down in Dayton. And with these successive conferences on peace that we've had, held by the Peace Implementation Council, held by the Steering Board, the outcome of those conferences has been endorsed variously over the years by this Council. It is all our fervent hope, Mr. President, that one day Bosnia and Herzegovina will be able to graduate from the Council's attentions and take its place as a normal and full member of Europe. The Dayton Peace Agreement mandates one state, two entities, and three constituent peoples. The High Representative is also mandated by Dayton as the final authority on the civilian implementation of the peace agreement. The powers that he is using have been backed by the Security Council. It's not a one-off. They have been successively backed by the Security Council. And I want to stress that, Mr. President. I also want to stress that the High Representative himself, under Dayton, is chosen by the Peace Implementation Council Steering Board. He isn't chosen by the Security Council, though the Security Council's interest has been evoked from time to time, but not universally. And I want to set that straight. It is open to people who have left the steering board and hence not had an opportunity to share in the selection of the High Representative to return to the steering board. Mr. President, the cause of Bosnia and Herzegovina remains critical to the issue of stability and security in Europe. The United Kingdom has great pleasure in cooperating with the European Union, with the US and others. This autumn we will chair the Berlin process, which emphasizes regional cooperation among the Western Balkans countries themselves. And I want to take a moment to salute EUFOR, who is executing its Chapter 7 mandate to maintain a secure and safe environment. I agree that it does not have executive authority, but to pretend that it does is a mischaracterization of its role. EUFOR is there to support the state institutions of Bosnia and Herzegovina and maintain safety and security for Bosnia and Herzegovina's citizens. And it's clear, Mr. President, and we've heard today, that those citizens want better relations with the European Union. They want Euro-Atlantic integration. We heard particularly from the representatives of Pakistan and Sierra Leone of their very strong support for the territorial integrity, sovereignty and independence of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I think all speakers in the Council want to uphold that. But it bears repeating that there is one threat to that today, and it lies in the person of the RS entity president, Milorad Dodik. His secessionist moves, his introduction of unconstitutional laws, the threats to adopt a new anti-Dayton constitution represent direct threats to that sovereignty, territorial integrity and independence, as well as to the aspirations of the Bosnian people. What Bosnia and Herzegovina needs, Mr. President, is more pluralist politics. There is no threat to Republika Srpska entity, nor to the Federation entity in EU integration, nor Euro-Atlantic future. I repeat this again, it is not a threat to RS citizens, it's not a threat to the Federation. There are many models in Europe of national and subnational government, and I would point out that the High Rep would not need to use his powers if the RS president did not challenge Dayton on an almost daily basis. The High Rep acts against all who challenge the state institutions of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It happens that at the moment, the biggest challenges are coming from Republika Srpska, but the High Representative's role is to uphold the Dayton Peace Agreement and help the state institutions to prosper and to do their work. Mr. President, in closing, I want to refer again to what other speakers have said. It's the responsibility of this Council, as it was in the 1990s and it was when the Dayton Peace Agreement was concluded, to uphold the Dayton Peace Agreement, to support Bosnia and Herzegovina on its journey freely chosen by her citizens for European integration, and to help her citizens thrive and prosper. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement. And now I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Shukran. Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Security Council, and I would like to reiterate to you our full support during your presidency this month. We also congratulate the French presidency for its successful tenure during the previous month. Mr. President, I would also like to welcome the presence of Her Excellency Željke Cvijanović, the chairperson of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also welcome the participation of the permanent representatives of Serbia, Croatia, and the European Union. I would also like to thank Mr. CRISTIAN Schmitd for his briefing. Mr. President, we follow with concern the political developments that have taken place in recent months in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the unprecedented divergence between the main political actors in the country. It is regrettable that while we should celebrate the 30th anniversary of the end of the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina this year, we are instead witnessing increasing political deterioration in the country. This situation does not only weaken trust between the constituents of the country and delay the reconciliation process, it also undermines the progress achieved in building the country's political and economic structures. Moreover, the ongoing conflict and the escalation of tension will only widen the divisions between the political actors and threaten the country's stability. Accordingly, I would like to emphasize the following today. First, it is important to adhere to the Dayton Peace Agreement and to abide strictly by its provisions as the primary consensus-based foundation for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Therefore, we reiterate our call to all political parties to respect this agreement and its annexes and to seize the balance that it offers in order to secure a better future for the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Second, political differences and tensions must not in any way undermine the democratic process or threaten the stability of Bosnia and Herzegovina or its constitutional and institutional order. Therefore, we encourage everyone to uphold the virtue of constructive dialogue and use all available means to promote inclusiveness and convergence rather than a political stalemate and to choose consensus over disagreement. In conclusion, we encourage all political actors to focus their efforts on development in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the development to which all Bosnians, Croats, and Serbs aspire to, and to avoid any course of action that could divide or threaten the unity of the country. In this regard, Algeria reaffirms once again its full support for the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina in accordance with the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and international law and in conformity with the provisions of the Dayton Peace Agreement. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Algeria for his statements and now give the floor to the permanent representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President, and congratulations once again for assuming the presidency and to France for a successful presidency in April. I would like to thank the High Representative of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Mr. CRISTIAN Schmitd, for his latest report and for participation today. I would also like to welcome at today's meeting the Chair of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Madame Cvijanović, as well as a representative of Croatia, Serbia, and the European Union. Mr. President, as we've heard several times today, 2025 marks 30 years since the signing of the Dayton Peace Agreement that ended the horrific war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Dayton laid out the foundation for peace, stability, and progress. This year's anniversary should be seized to reflect on past achievements and to look forward on how to accelerate progress. Unfortunately, in recent months, we have witnessed a significant rise of tensions stemming from rhetoric and actions by Republika Srpska entity authorities and the unfolding of a political and constitutional crisis. Denmark is deeply concerned about these developments. Mr. President, all actors must ensure full compliance with and implementation of the Dayton Peace Agreement, as well as respect the independence of the judiciary. We are deeply concerned about recent months' secessionist rhetoric and actions taken in Republika Srpska under the leadership of Mr. Dodik. These actions run counter to the Dayton Agreement. We condemn these actions as they pose a clear threat to the constitutional framework and integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. These actions threaten the functioning of central state institutions, which is key for stability and progress. Such actions are not only provocative, but also dangerous, as they risk jeopardizing the stability in the broader region. Denmark remains committed to Bosnia and Herzegovina's sovereignty and territorial integrity as a single and united country with its multi-ethnic character. It should be clear that the Dayton Agreement does not give the right to entities to secede. Any such attempts are thus completely unacceptable. Mr. President, upholding the Dayton Agreement also means safeguarding the institutions deriving from it. These institutions and mechanisms have ensured stability and progress for the past 3 decades. Denmark fully supports the work and efforts of the High Representative and his office, whose role and decisions must be respected in order to implement the civilian part of the peace agreement. As we've heard, the High Representative had been legitimately appointed by the steering board of the Peace Implementation Council in accordance with established procedures. We look forward to the day when international supervision is no longer needed, but we're not there yet. Mr. President, the security situation currently remains calm. We commend EU4 Althea for its presence and vital role in upholding peace and ensuring a safe environment. We urge all actors to refrain from any provocative rhetoric or actions that could escalate tensions. Focus should be on what unites and benefits the citizens of the country. Among these are the aspirations of joining the European Union, an aspiration shared by all parties in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Denmark, too, is committed to this. We therefore encourage leaders to step up the pace of reforms and make use of the opportunity granted by the March 2024 decision to open EU accession negotiations once the conditions have been met. We regret recent actions that run counter to these efforts, including shrinking the space for civil society organizations, media, and opposition politicians in Republika Srpska. Before ending, I would like to pay tribute to the victims and survivors of the Srebrenica genocide, where approximately 8,000 men and boys were systematically murdered. The 30-year anniversary is coming up in only 2 months. We, the international community, have a shared responsibility to preserve the memory of those atrocities, to ensure that we learn from them so it never happens again. The 30-year anniversary should be used to promote reconciliation and reaffirm our commitment to truth and justice. Denmark stands with the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina as they work to build a peaceful, stable, and prosperous country. I thank you.
I thank the Permanent Representative of Denmark for her statement, and now give the floor to the Permanent Representative of Panama.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, President. We congratulate you and your team for taking over the presidency of the Council for the month of May. We are convinced that your broad diplomatic experience will guarantee success. We also congratulate France for the successful presidency of the Council last month. My delegation welcomes Her Excellency Ms. Željke Cvijanović, Chairperson of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as the delegations from the European Union, Serbia, and Croatia. We welcome the introduction of the 67th report by the High Representative for the implementation of the peace agreements for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Firstly, it is important to recognize that while obvious challenges persist, We cannot ignore significant achievements for Bosnia and Herzegovina in terms of long-term stabilization over the past 30 years. This is thanks to political dialogue and the framework established by the Dayton Agreements. And it is precisely because of those achievements that it is urgent for us to express our great concern at the escalation of tensions in the country resulting from recent political events which could undermine institutional and democratic stability in the country. Among the most alarming events are the attempts at institutional fragmentation by promoting a constitution which is separatist in nature, the conviction of the president of Republika Srpska for flouting decisions by the High Representative, and the adoption of laws which could restrict the freedom of expression and limit the work of organizations, civil society organizations. The implementation of Annex 7 of the Dayton Accord also continues to face challenges. According to the 2022 report by the Ministry of Human Rights and Refugees in Bosnia and Herzegovina, adopted in May 2024, more than 91,000 people remain displaced within the country. In turn, data from the UN High Commissioner for Refugees indicate that some 17,000 refugees from Bosnia and Herzegovina remain abroad. Moreover, the case of a woman of Serbian origin who is 70 years old and was a victim of aggression in December 2024 after her return shows that there are persistent challenges in terms of security for minorities who have decided to return to their places of origin. Beyond these figures, Panama also expresses its concern at the lack of updated information on these individuals. This merely limits any possible national response. Mr. President, special emphasis must be placed on the following. Panama categorically rejects any form of genocide denial or glorification of war criminals, because these actions violate our principles, the United Nations Charter, justice, and are an affront to humanity. More specifically, we reject the declarations, the statements made by the mayor of Viječu in Republika Srpska, who unfortunately in March of this year publicly condemned individuals for atrocious crimes through international tribunals. These recent events have shed light on a dangerous resurgence of divisive narratives, both ethnic and political, which put in jeopardy important and considerable progress made in recent decades towards peace and reconciliation. With this complex backdrop, as this Council has done through a press communique just a little over a month ago, Panama would call for constructive dialogue among all parties. It is imperative to avoid greater fragmentation of the social fabric. All parties must overcome their differences and prioritize peace and the collective well-being of the entire population by strictly applying the Dayton Accords and the relevant resolutions of this Security Council. We firmly believe that the rule of law, constitutional order, sovereignty, and territorial integrity must be safeguarded as essential pillars for stability and sustained peace in the country. At the same time, Panama reiterates its conviction that regional organizations must play a central role in promoting peace, stability, and development within their respective regions. With that said, Panama will continue to watch closely progress in Bosnia and Herzegovina as it on its path towards European integration. On this process, while we welcome the participation of Bosnia and Herzegovina in the growth plan for the Western Balkans, we underscore the urgent need to conclude the reform agenda. In this context, we trust that the differences between the different communities within Bosnia and Herzegovina can be overcome through constructive dialogue supported by the European Union within the framework of the Dayton Peace Agreements. While we understand the concerns which may arise given the overarching faculties of the High Representative, we would call on all political actors to further cooperation and to pursue channels for dialogue and to work constructively to work towards lasting peace. And the High Representative himself made this appeal today to all political actors and called on them to resume dialogue, to work constructively towards lasting peace. Thank you.
I thank the Permanent Representative of Panama for his statement, and now I give the floor to the Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, we would like to commend France for its successful steering of the presidency last month and wish Greece success as it assumes the presidency this month. I thank High Representative Schmitd for his informative briefing. The Republic of Korea continues to support his valuable efforts to ensure the implementation of the Dayton Peace Agreement. My delegation also welcomes the participation of Bosnia and Herzegovina's chairperson of the presidency. Mr. President, this year marks the 30th anniversary of the Dayton Peace Agreement, which ended the conflict and laid the foundation for peace and coexistence in Bosnia and Herzegovina. While progress has been made, the journey toward a lasting peace remains incomplete. This is why the Security Council, in its press statement last March, expressed concern over recent developments and urged all political actors to engage in sincere and constructive dialogue. Against this backdrop, my delegation makes the following points. First, the Republic of Korea firmly supports the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Commitment to its unity as a sovereign state is a core principle of the Dayton Agreement, as explicitly stated in Article 1. The agreement itself is a product of international efforts to end the country's past tragedies. All parties must return to fundamental principles and the spirit of the Dayton Agreement and refrain from unilateral actions or rhetoric that undermine Bosnia and Herzegovina's statehood, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Second, we urge all political leaders to respect judicial authority and the legitimacy of state institutions. Recent instances of disregarding court decisions or obstructing legal mandates risk institutional paralysis and erode public trust. This erosion could in turn weaken state legitimacy and threaten regional stability. That is why this Council has consistently emphasized the importance of upholding the Constitution and the institutions established by the Dayton Agreement. Political dissent should remain within institutional boundaries. Third, the Republic of Korea fully supports Bosnia and Herzegovina's EU integration process, including the accession negotiations launched in March 2024. We call on all constituent communities to cooperate constructively and refrain from political boycotts or legislative obstruction that hinder reform. The EU path chosen by the people should not be compromised by short-term partisan interest. Fourth, we reaffirm our strong support for EUFOR Althea, a pillar of regional stability. Amid rising tensions between state and entity-level institutions, EUFOR plays a vital role in maintaining a safe and secure environment under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. Mr. President, as we mark 3 decades since the Dayton Agreement, let us recall that peace is built not only on the absence of conflict, but on mutual respect, the rule of law, and democratic accountability. While the region's painful past remains vivid, it must not define its future. Thank you.
I thank the permanent representative of the Republic of Korea for his statements, and now I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, High Representative Schmitd, for briefing us today and for your most recent report. I also welcome the participation of the chairperson of the presidency of Bosnia-Herzegovina. Mr. President, I will be brief. The United States remains committed to stability in Bosnia and Herzegovina and to the Dayton Peace Agreement. We've watched recent events in Bosnia and Herzegovina with concern. We urge political leaders to de-escalate and avoid actions that could increase instability or violence in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and to engage in constructive dialogue that leads to greater stability. The United States firmly opposes secession and destabilizing rhetoric. And has been echoed around this table, we support Bosnia and Herzegovina's sovereignty, and territorial integrity, and multi-ethnic character. Rooted in the Dayton Peace Accords, we welcome the contribution U4's Operation Althea makes to a safe and secure environment in Bosnia-Herzegovina. We recognize the importance of the Office of the High Representative in supporting implementation of the civilian aspects of the Dayton Peace Accord. The Dayton Peace Agreement. The United States supports Bosnia and Herzegovina as it works to secure the future of all its citizens. Every member of this council should support Bosnia-Herzegovina achieving the same. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for his statements, and now I give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank High Representative Christian Schmitd for his report on the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina and welcome the participation of Mrs. Željke Cvijanović, chairwoman of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as the representatives of Serbia, Croatia, and the head of the delegation of the European Union in today's meeting. Mr. President, Guyana is concerned about the troubling developments in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the reporting period. Rising tensions in the political landscape and lack of progress in the implementation of the 5+2 agenda and the European Union accession process have created an extraordinary crisis that demands urgent attention. As the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina prepare to mark the 30th anniversary of the signing of the Dayton Peace Agreement later this year, we call on the leaders to recommit to the path of peace and to work together to rebuild trust and understanding. The Dayton Peace Agreement continues to provide a solid framework for reconciliation, peace and stability in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we encourage enhanced support for the ongoing efforts to achieve lasting peace and stability. With this in mind, Guyana would like to underscore the following messages. First, EU accession is an important step for Bosnia and Herzegovina in transforming its socio-economic landscape. We have taken note of the stalled momentum since the European Union's decision in March 2024 to open accession negotiations with Bosnia and Herzegovina and encourage continued collaboration towards achieving this goal. Second, Mr. Schmidt's report highlights the low participation of women at different levels of government, as well as their low representation in the labor market. Guyana stresses that women's equal participation and leadership in political and public life are essential to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Through increased participation of women, decisions are more likely to be inclusive, comprehensive, and sustainable. We therefore encourage the relevant authorities to take effective action to align legislation across the country with gender equality and to ensure more balanced political participation and power sharing between men and women at all levels of political and public life in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Third, The challenges faced by young people in Bosnia and Herzegovina must be addressed, including limited opportunities for advancement and other challenges that are driving youth dissatisfaction and high emigration rates. To unlock the full potential of the youth population, they must be empowered to participate in the decision-making processes and contribute meaningfully to the society. We welcome the ongoing efforts to implement the Youth Peace and Security programs with the support of the UN Secretary-General's Peacebuilding Fund. Finally, as a multi-ethnic society, Guyana embraces inclusivity and the full participation of all ethnic groups in the national development process. We underscore the importance of upholding the provisions of the General Framework Agreement for Peace and urge all relevant stakeholders to act in accordance with the provisions contained therein. We reiterate our calls to political leaders to prioritize the national interests of all citizens through constructive dialogue to address divergent views. In closing, Mr. President, Guyana urges actors at all levels to continue their efforts to ensure that peace and security of Bosnia and Herzegovina is achieved and with full respect for its sovereignty. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana for her statement. I give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, allow me to congratulate you on the presidency of the Council this month, and I wish you all success. We also commend the French delegation in the manner they have steered the Council's work last month. We warmly welcome the participation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, in particular Her Excellency Mr. Jovanovic, Chairperson of the Presidency. We also acknowledge the presence of the representatives of Serbia, Croatia, and the European Union. My delegation also thanks the High Representative for his briefing. The Security Council's engagement on Bosnia and Herzegovina reflects a shared commitment to peace and stability in the Western Balkans. We recognize the progress achieved since the Dayton Peace Agreement, while remaining mindful that the lasting peace requires continued effort from all stakeholders. Recent developments present both opportunities and challenges. Bosnia and Herzegovina's advancement toward European integration demonstrates the potential for positive transformation and offers a foundation for continued cooperation. Experience has shown that inclusive dialogue and consensus building are vital for sustainable peace. We encourage all parties to use existing constitutional frameworks to address challenges through constructive engagement. The extension of the EU-led stabilization force mandate signals ongoing international support. This presence continues to play a positive role in maintaining an environment conducive to dialogue and development. In that context, my delegation would like to highlight three priorities. First, supporting the implementation of the General Framework Agreement for Peace, which remains the basis for stability. Second, encouraging inclusive dialogue that respects the interests of all communities. Third, maintaining constructive support for Bosnia and Herzegovina's development path, including its European aspirations. The international community's role remains one of support and facilitation. Sustainable solutions must be reached through consensus among all stakeholders with full respect for Bosnia and Herzegovina's sovereignty. In conclusion, Mr. President, my delegation reaffirmed its commitment to the full respect of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, political independence, and unity of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and encourages working with all parties toward a peaceful, inclusive, and multi-ethnic society. We are confident that through continued engagement, positive outcomes can be achieved for all communities and the wider region. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Somalia for his statements, and now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by wishing you every success in your presidency of the Security Council. I would like to thank High Representative Christian Schmitd for his briefing to the Council. I would also welcome the presence among us here in the Council of Ms. Željke Cvijanović, Chairperson of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. As we celebrate this year, 30 years since the Dayton-Paris Peace Accords, Bosnia-Herzegovina is going through one of the worst political and institutional crises in its history. Its unity is threatened. Its territorial integrity is under attack. The constitutional order, established in 1995, is facing unprecedented and unilateral challenges as a result of decisions adopted by the Republika Srpska entity. Following the verdict handed down against the president of that entity on the 26th of February, it is irresponsible for leaders and for some elected officials of Republika Srpska to reverse the peace gains by exploiting the legal status of a single individual, regardless of that person's functions. The decision by the Constitutional Court to suspend the laws passed in Republika Srpska on the 5th of March must be respected by everyone. Mr. President, France is concerned by the draft new constitution of the Republika Srpska entity. It is a further attack on public order, on unity, and on the territorial integrity of Bosnia-Herzegovina, and it is a new challenge to the peace accords. France believes or sees as unacceptable threats by Republika Srpska leaders against staff of state institutions and forcing them to resign. Given this situation, France would recall its support for the unity and territorial integrity of Bosnia-Herzegovina. We also support the constitutional order and state institutions within the framework of the Dayton-Paris agreements. The European path for Bosnia-Herzegovina requires respect for rule of law and decisions by the courts, public freedoms, and an enabling environment for civil society. France invites Republika Srpska leaders not to embark on the path to separation, which, by compromising European prospects of the country, will be to the detriment of the citizens of Bosnia-Herzegovina. The decision by the European Council conditionally to open accession negotiations for Bosnia-Herzegovina to the European Union is a sign of encouragement and trust, and it is regrettable that some Bosnian political actors are not taking this opportunity. Mr. President, peace is built in people's hearts and minds. There cannot be any lasting peace or common European future without a shared vision in Bosnia-Herzegovina and in the Western Balkans. This summer, it will be 30 years since the Srebrenica genocide, and it remains an open wound in the heart of Europe. I'd like to think about the victims of this genocide, and this commemoration should be an opportunity to facilitate common work to ensure genuine reconciliation of memories, and this involves respect and honor for all civilian victims of conflicts in the 20th century, regardless of their ethnicity or their religious beliefs. But let us be clear, there is no room for genocide denial or historical revisionism or the glorification of war criminals who have been condemned or sentenced by justice in a country and in a region which has expressed its desire to accede to the European Union. Mr. President, the Dayton-Paris agreements brought about peace after the deadliest conflict in Europe since the Second World War. 30 years later, it is the responsibility of this Council to maintain peace and stability in Bosnia-Herzegovina. While the security situation in the country is stable, history has taught us not to underestimate threats posed by weakening institutions and discourse that stigmatizes one ethnic or religious group as a whole. International presence in Bosnia and Herzegovina remains necessary. The EUFOR Althea European operation since 2004 has played a key role in maintaining stability and in a secure environment in the country. Turning to the civilian component of the Dayton-Paris agreements, France reiterates its support for the mandate of the High Representative. As a witness to the Dayton-Paris Accords, we will continue to support unity, territorial integrity, and sovereignty of Bosnia-Herzegovina. We call on all witnesses to the agreement to do the same. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for his statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as representative of Greece. I thank High Representative Christian Schmitd for his briefing. I also welcome the presence of the chairperson of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as the representative of the European Union, Croatia, and Serbia. Greece remains seriously concerned over the recent escalation of political tensions in Bosnia and Herzegovina at both state and entity level. We regret the recent legislative acts and initiatives in the Republika Srpska, which risk undermining the constitutional order and political unity of the country. Greece calls on all political actors and stakeholders to put an immediate end to any disruptive actions which endanger the stability, constitutional order, and unity of BiH. We stress that the sovereignty, territorial integrity, constitutional order, and political independence of BiH, in full respect of the Dayton Peace Agreement, cannot and will not be put into question. Both entities must demonstrate strong political will and commit to a sincere, open, and constructive dialogue in good faith and trust in order to reach a mutually acceptable solution within the Dayton institutional framework so as to overcome the current political crisis. In this process, the country's unity and political stability, in full respect of BiH independence and international personality as a single, united and sovereign country, must remain undisputed and beyond doubt. Greece will continue to support any mediation efforts towards this end. Furthermore, we urge parties to abstain from divisive and secessionist rhetoric, which undermine the country's long-standing achievements toward peace, reconciliation, and unity, as well as the European perspective of the country. This year, we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the Dayton Peace Accords, a historic agreement which brought an end to a destructive and violent war in the heart of Europe. Even though there are voices challenging its relevance today, we cannot cast any doubt on the utmost significance of the peace agreement, which succeeded in its ultimate aim, to end the tragic European conflict and lay the groundwork for enduring peace and stability in Western Balkans. Greece reiterates its steadfast support to the Dayton Peace Agreement and its institutions as a cornerstone for peace, stability, and reconciliation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, a country in our immediate neighborhood. We further welcome the continuous involvement of the international community towards stability and prosperity in BiH and the broader region. Strengthening the institutional structure of BiH in a spirit of mutual trust and on the basis of sincere dialogue should be pursued by all political actors and stakeholders in the region. Furthermore, Greece is strongly committed to the maintenance of stability and security in BiH. Our continuous engagement and substantial support to the European Union's Operation EUFOR Althea remain among our main priorities. We reiterate our firm position that all parties should engage fully and constructively towards realizing the European aspiration of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Greece welcomes the European Council decision of March 2024 to open accession negotiations with BiH, as it reflects the EU's strong commitment to the European perspective of the country and all its citizens, and look forward to the adoption of the country's negotiating framework once conditions are met. Both entities must join the efforts to accomplish substantial reforms which are required to the European integration of the country in full respect of the Dayton Peace Agreement. In closing, let me reiterate that the Thessaloniki Declaration of the EU Western Balkans Summit of 2003 laid the key principles of the European integration process based on a shared European vision of fundamental values, amongst them dialogue and peaceful resolution of conflict. Both of them remain of the utmost importance for the safeguarding of peace and stability in the Western Balkans. I resume my functions as President of the Council, and I now give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Željke Cvijanović, Chairperson of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council. I thank you for the opportunity to address you at this decisive moment for Bosnia and Herzegovina and instead for the credibility of the international system we all rely on. Although I currently chair the tripartite presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, I also speak to you today in my constitutional capacity as a sub-member of that presidency, elected by the citizens of Republika Srpska, one of the two constituent entities that comprise BiH, and that accounts for 49% of the territory of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Dayton Agreement was not a perfect solution, but it was an act of courageous diplomacy that balanced three peoples and two entities in one state. It was and remains a legally binding treaty lodged in the annals of this Council, whose Annex 4 is our Constitution and whose Annex 10 is the mandate of the High Representative, or defines the mandate of the High Representative. It created a decentralized consensus-based system precisely so that no single actor, domestic or foreign, could dominate the others. Yet today, that balance is being hollowed out by an unaccountable foreign intervention, either through the actions of various high representatives or foreign judges in the Constitutional Court of VIH. Allow me to begin where Dayton begins, with the rule of law. Annex 10 is clear when it's requiring that the High Representative shall be approved by the UN Security Council. This has never happened in Mr. Schmidt's case. He was selected by the self-appointed Peace Implementation Council, an informal assemblage with no charter basis, no treaty or legal authority, and no power to override this body. And he has acted based on the so-called bond powers that are not codified in any legally binding international instrument. Some claim that because the PIC informed the Council of its selection, confirmation became unnecessary. But if this Council's vote were unnecessary, Annex 10 would never have required it. Annex 10 is also clear about the mandate of the High Representative. The Dayton Agreement did not authorize the High Representative to legislate, to suspend constitutions, to criminalize elected officials and political parties, or rule by decree. Yet that is precisely what Mr. Christian Schmitd and some of his predecessors have done many times in the 30 years. Here lies the heart of a continual crisis in Bosnia, whose culmination we are witnessing today. Everything that flows from that irregularity, lack of UN Security Council confirmation, and unlawful impositions beyond the mandate set forth in Annex 10 is infected with the same defect. No legal system, domestic or international, can survive if the interpreters of the rules exempt themselves from the rules. Let me briefly mention only some of numerous edicts Mr. Schmidt unlawfully issued since arriving in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He unilaterally suspended the constitution of the Federation of BiH to impose a government he preferred, ignoring the election results. This has nothing to do with Republika Srpska and has nothing to do with Milorad Dodik, whom you mentioned here. He altered the electoral law, bypassing democratic parliamentary procedure. Again, this doesn't have to do anything with Republika Srpska. As well, so it was not provoked by Republika Srpska. As well, he extended the mandate of the Central Election Commission without legislative approval. He amended the criminal code to criminalize non-compliance with his own decrees, a move to primarily eliminate from political life a democratically elected president of Republika Srpska for fulfilling his constitutional duties to sign laws passed by the National Assembly of Republika Srpska, but also to intimidate any dissenting officials who would dare challenge his illegitimate rule. He cut public funding to the democratically elected political parties in Republika Srpska, canceling the political will, but also the voice of the vast majority of its voters. Esteemed members of the Council, this is neither the Dayton Agreement nor a democracy, and certainly not the rule of law. It is dictatorship, government by decree, unchecked by courts, devoid of appeal. What started as mere overreach has now solidified into a system of repression. Each action was justified in the name of functionality. Yet the result is not a more cohesive Bosnia. It is a deeply polarized country which can hardly survive this form and extent of foreign intervention. When Republika Srpska protests such violations, we are unjustly labeled as separatists. However, demanding adherence to international treaties is not separatism. Contrary to some narratives, Republika Srpska is not undermining the Dayton Agreement. It is upholding it. Our demands do not seek to dismantle Bosnia and Herzegovina, but rather to restore the legality and balance originally enshrined in the Dayton framework. For this reason, the National Assembly of Republika Srpska has enacted legislation to defend its rights within Dayton. These measures are not provocations. They are lawful responses to persistent violations of international law. The ongoing crisis in neither of Republika Srpska's making nor its interest. It has been triggered by Mr. Schmidt and his most expansive and authoritarian use of power, burdening the country with a series of unlawful impositions. Therefore, condemning Republika Srpska's actions without first addressing Mr. Schmidt's unlawful interventions is not only misleading, but dangerously one-sided. Allow me to state our position plainly. We remain fully committed to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina as defined by Dayton. As for the mandate of the High Representative, we seek to place it back on its legal foundation, which is Annex 10, and prepare for the closure of the OHR. We reject unilateral decrees that rewrite the treaty, criminalize debate, persecute political opponents through a weaponized judicial system, discriminate political parties, or suspend the will of voters. A legal reset in Bosnia is a logical next step if we want to prevent escalation and successive future crises. Therefore, I respectfully call on this Council to take some immediate steps. Schedule a formal vote on Mr. Schmidt's confirmation. If he cannot pass the vote, let us find a candidate who can and who will be appointed in accordance with Annex 10 of the Dayton Agreement. Number 2, establish an independent legal review under Security Council's auspices of the conformity of the so-called bond powers with Annex 10 and the UN Charter. 3, encourage all BIH stakeholders to engage in a dialogue aimed at preventing further crises and revitalizing functional governance. We are prepared to participate constructively, transparently, and in good faith. Mr. President, members of the Council, the Dayton Agreement ended a devastating war and laid the foundation for our constitutional system. It deserves respect, not manipulation and breach of its procedures. Let us together ensure that Bosnia's future is written not by decree, but by law. On a separate but critical note, because I know that some of you had some objections about my appearance here, I want to clarify one issue. As a member of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, I have been forced to engage directly with your missions due to obstruction by the BIH Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This ministry selectively restricts my diplomatic correspondence while granting unrestricted access to my Bosnian colleague. This bias extends even to Bosnia's permanent mission to the United Nations. Such actions demonstrate the reality of the state we are being asked to accept. A system where power is centralized, constitutional rights are disregarded, and even the fundamental ability to communicate is manipulated for political ends. I thank you for your attention and remain at your disposal for any further questions. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Cvijanović for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Stavros Davrinidis, Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations.
Thank you, Mr. President, and let me as well extend my warm congratulations to you on Greece's assumption of the Security Council presidency this month. Kalli επιτυχία. Allow me to begin. No one needs to translate this. It's just for you. Allow me to begin with the most recent developments. The European Union remains seriously concerned about legislation and initiatives in the Republika Srpska entity that run counter to the EU path of Bosnia and Herzegovina, including secessionist rhetoric and questioning the constitutional order of the country. The sovereignty, territorial integrity, constitutional order, including constitutional court decisions, and the international personality of Bosnia and Herzegovina need to be respected. Any action against these principles would lead to serious consequences. EU4 Althea continues to play a key role in supporting the authorities in Bosnia and Herzegovina in maintaining a safe and secure environment for all citizens. The European Union reiterates the importance of continued cooperation among international actors and expresses again its support to the mission of the High Representative and his office towards fulfilling the 5+2 agenda. The European Union reiterates its unequivocal commitment to Bosnia and Herzegovina's EU perspective as a single, united and sovereign country. The EU urges all political actors to renew the country's focus on progressing on the EU path, taking resolute actions to implement the necessary reforms. Thank you, Mr. President.
Ευχαριστώ, which means I thank His Excellency Mr. Stavros Stavrinidis for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Croatia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to use the opportunity to congratulate France on a successful presidency in April and wish all the best to Greece in the month ahead. Regarding the 67th report of the High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, we fully share the concern on the current political crisis in Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Republic of Croatia calls on all political actors in Bosnia and Herzegovina to respect the constitutional order of the country, its sovereignty, and to uphold the principles of equality and non-discrimination of the constituent peoples and others. We urge all political actors to refrain from divisive rhetoric and actions and to engage in constructive dialogue and cooperation in order to ensure the full functionality of the country's institutions. The current situation calls for strong and responsible diplomatic engagement to prevent escalation and to help navigate through the political crisis. Nevertheless, it is ultimately the responsibility of domestic political actors and the country's own institutions to take gradual and full ownership over the stability and functionality of Bosnia and Herzegovina. This is not only essential, but also a key precondition for the country's future as a member of the European Union. We appreciate the work done by the High Representative Schmidt and his accomplishments in executing this mandate. However, referring specifically to the 67th report of the High Representative, we would like to add that the report would have benefited from a more balanced treatment of the conduct of all political actors, especially of those actions aimed against the political status of Croats as the most underrepresented and vulnerable of the three constituent peoples. In this context, we must emphasize that the Dayton Peace Agreement and the Constitution as an integral part remain the cornerstone of the constitutional order and political stability of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Yet, the functionality of that order depends on the fairness and credibility of its democratic mechanisms. That is why electoral reform must be treated as the highest political priority. Only through meaningful reform, a reform that eliminates inequality among the constituent peoples and addresses systemic discrimination in the electoral process, can Bosnia and Herzegovina achieve lasting political stability. Electoral reform is not a peripheral issue. It is a cornerstone of a just and stable democracy and of any lasting national compromise. Finally, we commend Bosnia and Herzegovina for the significant progress it has made on its path towards EU membership. The European Union offers the best framework for peace, development, and prosperity. We fully support Bosnia and Herzegovina on this path and hope to see European integration return to the forefront of the political agenda, as it benefits all citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina and its three constituent peoples. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Croatia for his statements, and now I give the floor to the representative of Serbia.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, allow me to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month and to wish you every success in discharging your duties. Serbia has a strategic interest in the preservation of the stability of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Any instability, let alone conflict, would have a devastating spillover effect, halting economic development, derailing much-needed reforms, and creating yet another wave of chaos. It is precisely for these reasons that Serbia is invested in the stability of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Dayton Agreement put an end to the war and has ensured peace and security for 30 years. This has been done through the constitutional structure set out in Annex 10 of the agreement. The preservation of the stability, therefore, requires full respect for the constitutional mechanisms that underpin it. The reality of Bosnia and Herzegovina is that it is a multi-ethnic society. The country remembers both days of joy and tragedy because of this. In order to preserve this diversity as a strength, it must be respected as such. If we seek a functional Bosnia and Herzegovina, we must respect what has already been achieved and tested, a structure based on 2 entities and 3 constituent peoples. Everyone must feel secure within the common state. No one in Bosnia and Herzegovina should be left constitutionally vulnerable. A state in which this is not the case cannot function properly. Respect for the constitutional rights and competencies is essential. In a complex environment of Bosnia and Herzegovina, neither ethnic outvoting nor external imposition of decisions can provide sustainable solutions. Such actions can only serve to violate the constitutionally defined rights of the constituent peoples and the competencies of the 2 entities, which is neither legally acceptable nor politically helpful. Thus, the problem is functioning of Bosnia and Herzegovina have not been caused by the Dayton Agreement, but rather by latent or overt attempts to undermine it. It is our understanding, as stated also in the report of its government, that Republika Srpska does not advocate secession, but the preservation of the Dayton Agreement and protection of its constitutionally granted competencies. As a signatory of the Dayton Agreement, Serbia finds such a claim valid and justified. On the other side, one cannot escape the impression that the verdict of the Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina against President of Republika Srpska Milorad Dodik, as well as the issuing of an arrest warrant for Mr. Dodik, Mr. Višković, and Mr. Stevandić on charges of violating the constitutional orders of Bosnia and Herzegovina, are politically motivated. Interpol's decision not to act on the request by the Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina to issue an international arrest warrant for Mr. Dodik underscores the argument that the proceedings against the President of Republika Srpska are politically motivated and not grounded in the principles of impartial criminal justice. Serbia also considers that the imposition of the higher-up decisions is not in line with the mandate stipulated in Annex 10 of the Dayton Agreement, nor universally democratic principles. Equally inconsistent with these principles is the attempt to eliminate democratically elected representatives of Republika Srpska from the political life of Bosnia and Herzegovina by misusing the judicial authorities for political purposes. Mr. President, I'm obliged to note that serious accusations against Serbia continue to be voiced by the Bosnian political representatives. These allegations, which are a part of both internal narratives and the diplomatic rhetoric coming out from the political Sarajevo, suggest covert intentions to dismantle Bosnia and Herzegovina. We categorically reject such claims. Once again, we shall refrain from a counter-narrative that political Sarajevo seeks to dismantle Bosnia and Herzegovina as a state of 2 entities and 3 constituent peoples. Whether these attempts come from Bosniak ethnic parties or so-called civic parties, drawing support primarily from the same ethnic group, the underlying goal remains the same. We, however, believe that even assuming good intentions, efforts to remove internal checks and balances must be judged not by intent, by the destabilizing consequences that may produce. In conclusion, let me stress that in the current tense climate in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the overriding priority, both internally and externally, must be the preservation of peace and stability above all else. Neither side should be exempt from its responsibilities in this regard. I assure you, Mr. President, that Serbia will continue to contribute to regional peace and stability to the best of its abilities. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Serbia for his statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
Health outreach to curb the spread of hepatitis E. And staying in the region, the UN Refugee Agency is gravely concerned by the rapidly increasing number of Sudanese refugees crossing into eastern Chad. Nearly 20,000 people, mostly women and children, have arrived there in the past 2 weeks alone. The sudden influx reflects the escalating violence in Sudan's North Darfur region, particularly in and around El Fasher, which is triggering mass displacement. Refugees arriving in Chad report that over 10,000 people are still en route, trying to reach the border to escape the violence. A rapid protection assessment by UNHCR and its partners indicates that 76% of the newly arrived refugees were subjected to serious protection incidents, including extortion, theft, and sexual violence. Chad already hosts 1.3 million refugees, including 794,000 arrivals from Sudan since the conflict started more than 2 years ago. While the country continues to show remarkable solidarity in hosting refugees, it cannot bear this burden alone. UNHCR urges the international community to urgently step up support for the response. Only 20% of the $409 million required to respond to the refugee crisis in Chad has been funded. And our peacekeeping colleagues in South Sudan tell us of continued airstrikes in Fangak, a remote county in Jonglei State. According to reports received by the mission last night, further aerial bombardments have allegedly taken place in and around New Fangak town, residential areas near the Fao River, and other locations. The mission is working with all partners to verify civilian displacement figures, facilitate assistance for communities who have been affected by these events, and reduce tensions. Guang Kong, the mission's deputy special representative, said that such attacks contravene the revitalized peace agreement and severely undermine efforts to build lasting peace in the country. He called on involved parties to prioritize civilian